Could a masked vigilante exist in today's society, fighting crime and injustice? And by trying to achieve superhero status ourselves, what can we learn to become better humans? This is the Vigilante Superstar Podcast.
Hey, Jeremy. Welcome to the Vigilante Superstar Podcast. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. So we worked on a project that, well, we didn't go anywhere with it at some point. You were hired for a while. We worked together briefly, and you wrote a really cool screenplay that we couldn't afford to do. So we, just moved on and did a really cheap one. But anyway, so I've crossed paths with you a few times, but I know that you can offer a lot of expertise to this conversation. So thanks for jumping on. I thought that would be good for you to start by just talking a little bit about who you are, what you do, and maybe why I would even invite you on this podcast, because you obviously have a lot of expertise. You're in a new documentary I'm working on, also known as Vigilante Superstar, and so and you have a huge part in that, kind of narrating through the entire documentary. So this will be a similar type conversation. But why don't you just give us a quick 30 seconds to a minute summary of kind of what you do?
Oh, wow, you could constrain me. So I'm one of the millions of Hollywood writers that came out to LA to become a writer, and I was blessed and fortunate enough to make a career in the stuff I loved growing up. So mostly I've been doing Warner Brothers superhero animation for a long time, and I parlayed that into a somewhat successful career writing comic books for DC Comics right now. I write Green Lantern, I write The Flash, I've written Batman and animated movies, one with Bruce Timm, and I've also done some Lego Batman stuff. That's not the Lego Batman movie, but a younger version of those. So I've been and to be honest is like, I pretty much thought I was going to be Batman well past the time that I should have been thinking that I would become Batman. I'm taking gymnastics because, yes, the way to get away from people is doing back handsprings, and, I'm doing martial arts and all this stuff, I just wasn't independently wealthy. I think that's the only thing that stopped me.
That's what would keep you from it, for sure. I mean, you obviously have all the physical stature to do it. It's just toward 50, I'm sure that I could. 5'6", 170. Is that what you were? I don't know if that's quite going to do it, but that's one of the things we could talk about. But anyway, so the purpose of the podcast really is, and I, after going through 3 years of doing these interviews with, I think, 27 people I'm up to now. One thing I realized throughout these conversations was, okay, it's a fun conversation. I mean, I was a total fanboy, and I still love Batman stuff, and I used to collect Daredevil comics. I love Daredevil, was one of my favorite characters. So I'm still very much in that world. I love the new Matt Reeves Batman. Just anything I can get. I love to consume that stuff. And I just talked to all these people having this fun kind of water cooler conversation about, hey, why don't we see somebody like this? Why don't we see a Batman guy running around? And I know we've had vigilantes, and you even addressed that in the movie. There's people who have been vigilantes, in air quotes, who have done really profound things, or heroes that have risen up to, whether it's overthrow a government that's corrupt or stand up against injustice. There, we have stories like this, but looking at someone like Batman, for example, why couldn't someone like this exist in the modern days of, with technology and with all we know about fitness and training? And then the second part of that was, after having all these conversations, I realized that there's a bit of a self-help part to this. Every person I talked to was kind of like, yeah, it's fun to talk about this. But in reality, if you just try to eat this way or work out this way or be more aware of your surroundings or train in this or learn a new skill, it actually makes you a better human being. And whether that's empathy, compassion, or just some practical trade that you learn, it can kind of better you as a human and maybe even improve your happiness a bit in terms of just kind of achieving those levels. So yeah, are we going to be Bruce Wayne, Batman, and Prime? Very few people on the planet probably are like that, but it's a fun conversation to have. So that brings me to you, because you have a lot of the history of comic knowledge and all the different heroes and some of these more vigilante type heroes that don't have the godlike powers. Okay, so what are the comic books tell us about why vigilantes tend to rise up? I think I know the answer, but you can give us a bit more of a story perspective. Why do these people, I know that we're telling stories, and it goes back to Zorro and the Westerns and all those kind of things, but why do we have these vigilantes in comics and stories rising up to fight injustice?
So much of it has to do with kind of a weird not weird, but like an anti-authoritarian streak in a certain way, especially with Batman in particular, because you're dealing with somebody that has to do it because the system is not doing it. It's a reason why, if you notice, like in New York and Manhattan, which, is kind of a corollary to Gotham in a way, during the 60s and the 70s, when it was really, really bad and there was tons and tons of crime, you would be seeing a lot of pop culture and media coming out of that, whether it was Escape from New York or Death Wish, which are kind of the extreme examples of vigilantism, right? I don't think it's dissimilar to that. The idea that I have to now take on this role because the people that's supposed to take on that role are not doing it. The police are not doing it. The government is not doing it. So somebody's going to have to step in. And that's generally where vigilantism kind of comes in. In the Old West, U.S. Marshals and sheriffs and stuff, they were really just kind of, vigilantes with a star, right? Like they were doing, they didn't really give you the Miranda rights or anything like that. They were just kind of rolling with it. I mean, the biggest example to me, the one that captured my attention as a kid, was the Guardian Angels in New York. And when you really delve into that story and you find out these guys wearing red berets were just out there, and people were calling them vigilantes, but really they were just a symbol of something, like, we're going to step in if something goes awry. And that was enough to cause a lot of people to back off. But that's the reason in my mind is you have the people that get powers, right? And we're putting those guys aside, because if you have powers, you fall into this. We're very American. It's like, you have powers. Why don't you help out the government? It's like, because the government will screw you up, or they'll cut you up, or they'll try to steal it, or whatever. So you have to keep yourself secret. You have to keep yourself secret for your family and friends and stuff. But people like, Daredevil, although he has some powers, and Batman, it's like it becomes more of a local thing. It becomes a thing of like, the entire police department's corrupt, so no one's going to do anything, and you're taking it upon yourself. There's a psychosis there, obviously, because you're willing to step over the line of law and say, I'm going to do this, even though it'll probably end up with me in jail.
Yeah. And in comic lore, I mean, I'm not as well read as you are in this area, but seemingly there's a lot of origin stories that lead people to, like, they feel like there's no other choice. Like, okay, the legal system let me down. My wife, my parents, my whatever were killed. This happened to me. I just absolutely have to do something about it. And so that's when the fantasy part kind of starts to come in, where we train and we get gadgets and we get a cool car and we get arrows that shoot net guns and whatever. Like, so that's when we start to get a little wild. But you want to talk about that for a second too, just kind of, especially in comic history. And I know it wasn't always that way. I know Batman he just started out as a dude in tight clothes that, was a detective, sort of. He didn't really have the origin story until much later, if I recall that correctly.
No, I think very early on, the parents being murdered by a criminal, and then him.
Oh, that did happen. Okay.
Yeah, and then him taking it on because he wanted to strike fear in the criminal element. That was very early on. But you're not wrong. Like, weirdly, we're in this strange time where I feel like that's happening more and more. I feel like that people are, carrying weapons. People are carrying dash cams. People are, there's much more like, where I live in California, the amount of like flash mob theft, just carjackings, house robberies makes your brain go, well, how can I stop this? Not only stop it, but be proactive and like, do I need to help someone else? The problem is you're terrified that if you help somebody else, you're going to get in trouble. That's the thing that you have to somehow. I think that's what's interesting about comic heroes in a lot of ways. We all know that what they're doing is just. It's just that they're doing it, and unfortunately, if they do it and get caught, they're going to be in trouble. Because you're just like, well, I get it. But the way our legal system is too, it's like, you're innocent until proven guilty, and there's all this stuff. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying in the fantasy of it. I'll give you an example. We had a break-in not too far away, and of course the algorithm picks it up and immediately Instagram is like showing me security measures. But the one that came across that I thought was fascinating, it was like an Xbox controller, and it was a remote paintball gun that you put on your house that will fire paintballs at somebody as they're trying to break into your car or whatever. And I was like, that's a gadget. That is a straight up, like, it's that vigilante in Portland that walked around with bear mace, because he's like, well, I need to do this. They were just doing it out in the open. And actually, another weirdly thing, post-COVID, the ideas of having a masked vigilante are much higher, because the mask situation is like, well, everybody can wear masks now. So, the criminals are doing it. I could totally see somebody else doing it.
Well, that's what I think you said this in the movie too. You talked a lot about this back a couple of years ago, but when things start to get wild, we saw a lot of that. And it makes me think about this next election cycle, even not to get political, but it scares me a little. Whoever gets elected, that the other side is going to maybe riot or protest. And those protests are no longer as peaceful as they used to be, seemingly. There's more chance of violence because both sides show up. And we've seen a lot of, fights and people getting beaten badly, and and so you have to wonder if things start to become more like the Wild West, for lack of a better word. You might start seeing more of that, which I've said this just outside of this project. I've said, if things start to if they start to really degrade, and it even comes out to the suburbs, people are going to start taking action. People, whether it's on the border, whether it's in these big cities, like you said, paintball, great. It's non-lethal. You can like, my son lives in Chicago and he's got pepper spray and those kind of things. Those are great measures. But, if you get mobbed by 7 guys, like you're in trouble. And like, well, what are you supposed to do if the cops can't be everywhere? It's not their fault. They want to do more. They just can't be in all these places. So it makes you wonder, like, is this, like, I've talked to, through this journey, probably 4 special forces guys, and they're pretty elite special force. They're not just like, oh, I was in for a couple of years and got out. I mean, these are like lifers who did multiple tours of duty, and they're essentially doing these kinds of things very clandestine, but they're on a team. They're sanctioned by the military. But it just goes to show that it could be done with the proper intelligence and all those things too. So, but yeah, you just wonder with the way things are moving. We're not moving in a great direction. We're very divided. And you have to wonder if, like, and I'm certainly not promoting it, but will this happen more going forward?
I feel like it's more going to be like V for Vendetta. It's going to be a level of, like, if we're just talking in fantasy mode, it's like, am I going to be, I could probably respond to a criminal action faster than the police can. And I'm just saying that because they're understaffed. They're stretched thin. They have to prioritize problems. So if somebody gets carjacked or a purse happens, it can be sometimes 50 minutes before they get a police report or a police guy out. So if I'm monitoring some sort of thing and I go out there and, find the car and smash into it, the problem always comes down to the granular, like, person on person confrontation. Because it's like, well, I don't care how good you are as a fighter. If you get hit on the chin the wrong way, you're done. So, do you start doing, like we talked about, is it like, the net guns? Maybe it's not the net guns. Maybe it's tear gas bombs. Maybe it's, whatever it is, somebody is going to do it. Somebody's going to, like, I've thought about this. I've thought about, like, I remember somebody saying there was like a mall shooting. There was a special forces guy, and he said, my first priority was get my family out, but then I was going to go back in and neutralize the threat. Like, that was their mindset. That's what they were trained to do. And that might end up being illegal to a degree. That might end up getting you in trouble. But their mindset is, but I have to stop them from hurting people. And that is kind of the superhero mindset, right?
Sure.
That is very much a revolutionary. It's like, the greater good, or the good of these people, outweigh my own, consequences that may happen. Now, when you take it a premeditated vigilante thing where you're like, I'm just going to take it one step forward. I'm going to make sure my face is covered, and I might have a couple items to help me push over this type of thing so that I can get away.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me because
it is.
Because it's also in superheroes and vigilantes generally, we're not talking like the Punisher. It's
right.
like their whole point is they don't want to kill.
Right.
Their thing is I might want to hurt somebody, but like my goal is to help people and help the community. Versus Punisher is just like, no, we need to eliminate people. So I guarantee, like, somebody does it, somebody ends up getting away with it, they probably become a folk hero faster than anything. Because imagine I've seen some people, like an old guy. I remember seeing an old guy. It was like it was a video of a store robbery, and this old guy just tackled this kid and took the gun. And you're like, that's my guy. He's the man. Or somebody that trips some people running away. Like, we're at that stage now. We see all these people getting away with theft and robberies and et cetera. Yet, and they're just videotaping. It's when the guy stands up and does something, you're like, whoa, you're going to get in trouble for that. But I root for him, 100% root for him.
Well, who's the Marine on the, I know this is super controversial, but the Marine on the, was it the L train?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, like, as just a human being, I'm like, I understand that guy was trained to do that in that situation. I'm like, good for you, man, because no one's doing that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And now he's going to court, so we'll see, because, and he didn't mean to hurt, a lot of people are saying it's a racial crime or whatever, but it's, he didn't mean, and he felt horrible about actually ending that guy's life. And he tried to do everything.
By the way, and because he stood up, the other people on train stand up. And if you've ever been on a Manhattan train where somebody's
in Chicago, I get it.
Or Chicago, or like in Los Angeles, I've taken public transpo twice because each time has been like the scariest moment of my life, where I have a young kid.
Oh gosh, I can imagine.
I'm just thinking I'm going to have to Spartan kick this guy out the door because I have to protect my family.
Right.
And it's a mental health crisis. It's a drug crisis. Yeah. It's all sorts of things. And then you have these roving bands of gangs that are, thieving and stealing. And to a degree, it's like, I don't have the luxury of thinking about, that person. Right. I have to think about my family.
Yep.
Like you come to my house, that's on you,
And who knows how that's going to go down when it actually happens, because God forbid I have a situation like that. I mean, but you'll do what you have to do. And if it means, if your family's life is a risk and there's a metal bar there and you pick it up, you're going to do some damage, because you're like, I'm saving my family. And if I end up going to court, people are going to stand up for me. They're going to donate money, because it's, you hope that's right. Yeah. I mean, we are lacking in that kind of good Samaritan, because I think with social media and phones, it's gotten so scary. And I did talk to a criminal defense lawyer as part of this movie, and it was kind of fun because he ruined every Batman fan's dreams. He's like, Batman would be hunted by the law and the FBI and every Department of Homeland Security, like everybody, because he's just out there kicking butt and blowing stuff up and kicking down doors and stealing stuff. And it's like, he's breaking all these laws. And he's like, the reality is there is good Samaritan law. You can defend yourself up to the force that was put on you, which doesn't always work out great, because you can't think, oh, he hit me that hard, I'm going to hit him this hard back. Right. But there has to be kind of equal and opposite kind of repercussion. It can't just be like, oh, he punched me in the chin, I'm going to beat him to death with an axe. Like it can't be like that. And he's like, you can't just barge into a warehouse and try to burn up drug money, because he's like, you'll go to jail. Like and with security and everything that it is, and with the way they can track technology, and it would be really difficult. But yeah, so let's jump into the next thing here. Because I think this segues nicely in. So I guess based on partially comics, but also partially common sense, partially just what we know as, humans living in this world. First of all, why do you think we haven't seen more of this? I mean, we're seeing it in, like you just talked about, we've seen little bits of it. We've been exposed to little bits of it in the news, or someone rescues someone from a burning building or something. Like, we see these moments. Obviously, we were the rebels to begin with to become Americans. We stood up against a tyrannical government, against T-taxes. I mean, it was like crazy how far we've come with taxes now. Yeah. But yeah, so why do you think we don't see this happening? I mean, it's sometimes we see fantasy become reality. Why don't we see a true, highly trained Batman type guy come along outside of, the CIA, outside of the high-end military special ops guys? What do you think?
I think it's because, people of moral character want to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do. We're hoping that the rule of law applies, and because we know that not doing that will ruin. Like you said, you get caught, it's going to ruin your life completely. What's interesting is that the criminal element is more and more unafraid of the rule of law, and they can get away with a lot more. So it'll be interesting. At some point, somebody's going to go, well, I can take this on. I really do think it's going to happen more.
Yeah.
More once. Like recently, there was, like we were talking about the Guardian Angels. I just saw something. They were talking to Curtis Silva, who runs Guardian Angels. And in the background, they had just tackled a guy that they said was like trying to rob somebody. And people are like, oh, those guys are going to get in trouble. Those guys are going to get sued. And I don't think they did, or I don't think they care. So it's weird how I think law-abiding citizens will potentially adopt that same mentality. It's like, well, you're not going to, you don't care about this guy stealing everything, so you shouldn't care about me beating the crap out of him.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's not how the legal system works. I just think at some point somebody's going to go, I really do. I think somebody's going to go, all right, well, I see this person coming out of Target, with a shopping cart that he didn't pay for, and they're videotaping, and I'm just going to put on a mask and deck him in the face and then run off, and that'll be the start of, well, how much then you start, if I'm fantasizing, it's like, then you're going to be like, are the cops really going to look into this masked guy that just knocked a criminal out? I don't know,
Yeah. Maybe it's like varying degrees of what you could even, just like the criminals, like there's certain crimes that they just don't, you'll see people tearing iPhones out of an iPhone store, and it's like, are they really, they're up probably 1,000th on the list. It could be the same thing for the good guys, where it's like, and by the way, this is where the disclaimer will go on the bottom, where it's like, Jeremy is not condoning becoming a vigilante, but no, it is fun to think about. And I think every guy, like my wife never thinks about this stuff, but like every dude is just like, man, it'd be so cool if I did this, or if guys did this. And we know, that's why I love the special forces guys. They're just like the most badass guys. Like, and they're like modern day Spartans. They live their life to this day, 10 years out of the military, still training, still working out, still doing martial arts, still doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, still firing weapons. Like, they are the modern day Spartans. And unfortunately, that population is really shrinking in the United States. More and more people just can't even serve in the military. They can't qualify. But what do you think? Okay. So this is kind of a fantastical part of the conversation here, but like, what do you think it would take, just in your opinion, knowing all that you know about comic history, and even just with technology and where we're moving with technology, like, what do you think it would take for someone to do it? I mean, to do it right, and obviously we're talking about a huge span of time here, to train, and you can't be an 80-pound, 5'6" person and go fight crime. You're going to get wasted. I don't care what I mean, but what do you think?
I actually don't. I don't think. See, I would disagree with you there. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about. I don't think you're going to go up and fight somebody. I think you're going to figure out ways to incapacitate them without even getting near them.
True. Yeah, true.
There's going to be sound technology that they use to some effect in certain things, where you can make people vomit at a certain frequency.
Right.
They do tasing, smoke. The guy wouldn't have a Batmobile; he would have a motorcycle, so that he could, you've seen, if you've done any investigation, you can see motorcycles are way better in urban populations. Number one, number two, cops will only chase you for so long, and so there's a certain, once you start mapping that out, exit points. You have to be very strategic about it, right?
Sure.
But also, then you have to figure out who your targets are going to be. So if it's just a target of opportunity in terms of, and we're just talking fantastical, but like, if you're talking about like, are you going to be in that area when the 7-Eleven gets robbed? That's harder versus, I know this guy's a drug dealer, and so I'm going to figure out, that's always a thing that I think the first Punisher movie, I thought, not the first one with Dolph Lundgren, but like the second with Thomas Jane.
I like that one a lot, actually.
Yeah, the Thomas Jane one, he wasn't just guns a-blazing, which is usually what the Punisher is, but one of the ideas that he was using his ability to set up somebody for failure. That's interesting to me too, because
that's cool.
Maybe it's not, I'm Batman and I'm going in to beat up people, but it's like, I'm going to plant evidence that ruins this guy's life because I know
like
he's
a form of espionage, almost, sabotage and espionage.
And honestly, we could say right now that happens.
It does happen for sure.
It does happen, and it does happen. It could happen to public figures.
Mm-hmm.
It could not, and now we're entering the AI world where it's like, well, did he really say that? Did he not really say that? Yep. They've had celebrities that have picked up the phone. This is what's spooky to me. They've picked up the phone and they thought they were talking to their friend, and it wasn't. Yeah. It was somebody spoofing their voice on the other end, the other guy's voice. Yeah. And so you're going to be able to get a lot of secrets and a lot of different things. Whether or not that's admissible is a different question. But in terms of vigilantism, that might be a different form of vigilantism because, like you said, you have to be well trained to go in and go, I'm going to fight this guy. Well, why do you need to fight that guy? Bruce Lee said it's the art of fighting without fighting. Like, how can you do it without actually doing it would be interesting to me.
Like the battle's won before it's fought. Like you've got to strategize. Yeah, I think that, that came up in a couple conversations with a couple of these special ops guys. They're like, the criminal's always ahead of the curve. So that's why it's so, and it would be, almost every one of them to a person was like, you're not going to stand up on a fire escape and swoop down like Spider-Man and solve. I mean, it would be rare that happens because the cities are huge. Like it is going to be all intel based. It's going to be 6 months of observation. Not to mention you'll enjoy this because in the movie I did like a full deep dive. I asked everybody, how long would it take to learn this? How long would it take to learn that? And I added all the numbers together, and it's like just to be like at a low Batman level, maybe not even master, but you're looking at 5 years of nothing but 6 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day of training, just to be like ready to handle like even just street tactics, like how to deal with people on the streets. Like that's 5 years. Like you're going to do all these things to learn this martial art, that martial art, to be completely prepared for every situation. The jack of all trades, literally, and not even a jack of all trades, but like literally a master of those trades would take years and maybe even up to 10. So by the time, that's the fun part about the Batman story is like, okay, I know in Batman Begins, it's 7 years he's gone. Okay, so 7 years he goes out, learns the streets, learns to become a ninja, all this stuff. But suddenly he comes back and he knows technology and he knows all these, and he has Lucius Fox and people to help him. But I think you would need a team. I think you'd have to have a team.
Yeah, I think you need a team. And also, that's the when you talk about this stuff making you better as a human, like even as a kid when I thought I could be Batman, guess what? I was trying to run faster. I was trying to climb faster. I was trying to swim faster. I was trying to be these things because the idea that you put your singular focus into improving yourself so that you can become this other thing is such a great thing to think about. It's such a thing that you're like, I'm using this body that is given to me to try to put it to its elite level. I'm going to cut out the carbs and I'm going to go hardcore in. But what, like you said, it's like then you're making a decision. And if you have that much money, this is always the conversation that comes back to Batman. It's like, is that the most effective use of your money to go out and punch people? That's why I think there's crazier and crazier villains that appear. Because I am of the firm belief that we probably know all the main villains. Like we probably know who runs a drug cartel here or there or whatever. Right. And we probably know that they're dirty. It's about, how do we legally get them, shut them down? And that's that's a harder, it's the Al Capone. We got him on tax evasion. That was it. Right. But and again, a lot of these people will just, disappear. Listen, the Epstein list, right?
Oh, waiting for that to come out.
We all know these people went to prison, and it's like, but no one's been arrested. That's terrifying. So that's probably some, not this isn't a political thing, but it's absolutely some sort of intel operation that was trying to get dirt on people and leveraging that to blackmail or whoever. Yeah. And anybody's susceptible. That's what's crazy, Right.
I'm going to have to wrap this up, but let me get to one last thing for you. And you kind of brought this up a little bit, but through, and we probably even went off comics more than I thought we were going to, but that's okay. But what in kind of this fantastical look at, could this guy exist? And I think you just referenced this a little bit, but what can, I guess, trying to achieve certain elements of that, I'm going to use air quotes again, superhero status. Like how do you think that we can become better people? Like what do the comics teach us about? And even what are some of these common sense, real things we've talked about? What do they teach us about becoming a better human?
Not just the physicality of like trying to perform your best with the body that you've been given.
Right.
But I always said like a lot of times the morality of comics would back up some of my religious morality.
Sure.
I'm a pretty religious guy, but like the fact that Batman wouldn't kill was something that we could all fundamentally agree with. Mm-hmm. And that he would hold that as a high esteem because he had a high esteem for the value of life was a huge thing. I mean, obviously Superman and some of the more fantastical ones, they were very upfront about the kind of morality around those characters. But people like Batman, which a little grayer, same with Daredevil, there was a morality there, but one of the big components of that was justice. Mm-hmm. Like they kept hammering justice. It was about the fact that the system that's purports to hold up justice wasn't doing it. Mm-hmm. And so they were going to do it. And there's this kind of like supernatural belief in justice that it lives outside of us, that we all know that the minute you cut in line in front of somebody, that's wrong. So I think we all have that innate part of us that are going like, it's wrong that these people are stealing and nothing's happening to them. It's wrong that they're bringing drugs into our community and nothing's happening to them. So I feel like that's a huge piece of it. It helps us. It helps galvanize us because the minute we dull that sense of justice and that sense of right and wrong, the world will just slip further and further into chaos.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Let's do this again. I think we can do a part two. We were both a little crazy with time today. Sure. I'm not going to mention who forgot the podcast, but
that was me.
But we'll do it again. I think there's a lot more to talk about here. Both just locked up against some commitments. So thanks again for coming on, and we'll catch up again down the road.
All right.
Take care, man.